Hello fellow people persons, this is Nate for MMO Play checking out recently released goddess Amaterasu for PvP MOBA Smite. She is a Japanese goddess probably familiar to fans of the Okami games where she ran amok as a prettiful yet deadly wolf. In Smite, she's closer to her mythological counterpart as solar deity complete with sacred Kagami mirror. This is very exciting for me, a lover of all things mythological with a soft spot for underappreciated Eastern lore. Now, before we start, I must admit that my ability to PvP is questionable, greatly due to my inevitable panic in stressful situations, as my mind teeters rapidly between an instinct to kill, maim, destroy, and a desire to cry and bake my victims an apology cake. But it's not for lack of trying, so to that end, I'm going to approach this review as more of a hey, is this a neat character that's unique and fun to play and worth grinding for and or spending money on? And to that question, I offer a resounding yes, which is surprising for me because when it comes to MOBAs, I generally stick to supporting characters almost exclusively. What I lack in refined bloodlust, I tend to make up for with uber heals, figurative pom-poms, and gentle pats on the back. I admired Amaterasu dubiously, as when I heard of her impending release, I kind of imagined something quite a bit different than this odd mix of melee, tank, and support. The melee part was especially worrisome for me, as you'll see by my jittery camera. My brain and hands occasionally forget to coordinate. Shocked was I to find that I didn't completely suck thanks to a well-balanced kit that feels as powerful and well integrated in the early game as it does in the end game. My experience with melee characters in Smite has rarely favored my playstyle so well. I usually end up falling behind others in power until around mid-game when I earn the movement speed and gap closures necessary to get the drop on enemies. Amaterasu addresses these issues beautifully for me with a gap closer that has respectable range, a heal aura that increases power and movement speed, and a shield that also functions as a delayed AoE. I also want to briefly mention Amaterasu's basic skill passive, Illuminating Strike. What this does is allow her basic to create an aura around enemies after 3 strikes that increases damage that enemies take from all sources for 5 seconds. This is very helpful particularly as a supportive or defensive build, leading the charge with attack speed to pop auras on enemies quickly while your team comes up from behind and nukes the hell out of enemies crunched up on you. During one round, this is essentially how I turned the tide, going full defense for a team that seemed hell-bent on maxing damage over survival. This allowed me to distract the enemy while healing and buffing allies and debuffing enemies for an unexpected turnabout win. You'll probably find yourself spamming her first skill, Divine Presence, most often. Once earned, the skill functions more like a toggle, switching between Valor and Benevolent stance. Valor adds bonus power to both her and surrounding allies, while Benevolence increases movement speed, with a brief overlap between the two modes when activated for dual bonuses. Alongside movement speed gear like the Warrior Tabby, the relatively short 9-second cooldown allows this to function as both a gap closer and an escape, helping you put distance between enemies and yourself during intense situations. I didn't feel like Valor was especially vital to my ability to take enemies down, but in all-out brawl situations where its buff aura is spread across most of your team, it really shines and can help give your team a sudden unexpected edge. During the early game, when hit-and-run strategies are especially rampant in lieu of defensive gear, careful utilization of this skill alongside Glass Cannon party members can help give them just enough of a boost to rack up kills and get team gold flowing. Her next skill, Heavenly Reflection, is my absolute favorite, particularly when geared defensively. At cap, it offers 15% mitigation while charging up her floating mirror to an eventual line-long energy ball. My experience with this skill is that most players don't see the fireball coming, particularly given that it can be released before it's fully charged to tow down enemies that are trying to escape. Generally, players and enemy AI alike stick out a fight until they're nearly dead before trying to run from a melee player, but they don't count on a fireball that follows the defensive aura often to their doom. Even escape mechanics like Neith's backflip can't outrun a well-placed reflective bolt, especially when paired with her next skill. That brings us to Glorious Charge. Glorious Charge darts Amaterasu forward, damaging all minions in her path but stopping at the first god she hits, allowing her to immediately launch into a charge of Heavenly Reflection while spamming her basic to impart her oral debuff on enemies. Further, the skill silences enemies that are hit. Now, it's a very brief silence, but this makes for a very powerful interrupt that's easy to aim, especially on gods with longer startup animations on their ultimate abilities. Aimed well, this charge can both interrupt a skill, ruining an enemy's rotation, and situate Amaterasu just behind her target, making it difficult for them to backpedal and escape. Finally, her ultimate skill, Dazzling Offensive. Honestly, I'm not as impressed with this skill as I am with the rest of her overall kit. The animation feels overly long, and while it comes with a slow, it's not an especially powerful one and does very little to prevent enemies from backstepping. It's also a 3-hit combo that is only fully realized if both prior hits land, with a brief and very helpful stun that comes a bit late in the animation. While not necessarily a bad skill, the long animation leaves her considerably vulnerable and paints a target on her back in the middle of battle, so this has to be used very strategically or it will more often get you killed than not. On a positive note, each hit on the 3-hit combo series is preceded by a small leap forward, so enemies with movement skills on cooldown will have a difficult time escaping you. One of the great things about Amaterasu is her ability to fit well within nearly any mold. She builds well as a defensive character due to her innate mitigation, but her healing also allows her to sideline as a supportive buffer and debuffer, focused on helping allies push lanes. Meanwhile, her fast-traveling projectiles, charge, and self-sufficiency allow her to dash into enemy ranks and cause chaos while geared towards damage and attack speed. This makes her a great addition to the roster, particularly for players that want to get the most out of their favor or gem investment, by focusing on characters that can play well with any situation and any combination of players. And that's it for this review of Smite's lovely Amaterasu. Be sure to subscribe for more videos and let us know in the comments what you think of the character.